All right, in this video, I'm going to go over all of the stuff that was supposed to crash the real estate market, but never did. I'm that agent Kelly. I talk about Canadian real estate and my local market of Abbotsford and the Fraser Valley. And if you're into that, subscribe to the channel, like this video. And if you want to chat, I got a link in my description that will book you right into my calendar. Now, this is going to be another one of those videos that gets reposted on Twitter and 500 people verbally berate me and my family. However, I'm going to make it anyways. If we go back 40 years, especially here in Vancouver, but even Canada as a whole, there have been many times where people were calling for crashes that never happened. There were crashes, they just weren't these 60 to 70% crashes that people were, hoping were going to happen. So I'm not going to go over the late 70s and the 90s and then the, 2007 and then 2017. I'm just going to cover what has happened in the last couple years here, all of the things that were supposed to crash the market that never did, and then where we are at right now. So going back to 2020, we had the lockdowns, obviously, and everybody and their grandmother thought this was the end of Canadian real estate as we know it, including CMHC, which forecasted, I believe it was negative 18% in the real estate market, which never happened. Then we had the mortgage forbearance crisis, which some of you probably don't even remember this ever being a thing, because I had to actually really think back to remember that this even happened for a short period in time. But after the lockdowns, they were essentially allowing people to kind of like put off their mortgage payments for, I think it was like 3 months or something like that. For 3 months, you didn't have to make any mortgage payments and they would just add it on to the end of your amortization period. Well, at that time, people were saying, once this forbearance period is up, you're going to have all these investors dumping property onto the market, which is going to crash the market. And again, never happened. Then we had, Bank of Canada is going to raise rates and that's going to crash the market. Now, funny thing is, the market actually did crash. It went down 30 to 40%, but I guess that's not enough for a lot of people because we're still calling for more crashes. Like I literally remember seeing homes that would sell for 1.15 today, all day, go for 850 grand at the bottom in November 2022. But anyway, rising rates actually never caused that crash. Prices came off roughly 15%. About a month before we ever even did our first 0.25 basis point hike. So interest rates had nothing to do with that crash. That was just buyer fatigue. Then the next issue that we had was inflation. Come, summer 2022, inflation started getting out of control and people were talking about, nobody's going to be able to afford food and everyone's going to stop paying their mortgage and their rent and we're going to enter hyperinflation and blah, blah, blah. And obviously, well, to this day anyways, that hasn't happened. Then if you guys remember this, we had the banking crisis. I think it was SVB was the name of that bank, Silicon Valley Bank. That was it. All these banks went bankrupt, like 2 or 3 of them went bankrupt. And then, we were worried about contagion and is this going to spill over into all these other banks and that's going to crash the market and blah, blah, blah. Is this 2008 all over again? And again, never happened. Then Russia invaded Ukraine and everyone was worried about World War III for like the longest time after that. And World War III, of course, was going to somehow, one way or another, lead to a Canadian real estate crash. And then we had that Evergrande situation in China where the largest developer in all of China went bankrupt and everyone was worried about how that was going to spill over into the economy and that was going to somehow crash the market. Oh yeah, and then during this entire time, every 2 weeks, there was another reason why we should lock down the economy. And honestly, there's probably a whole bunch of other things that I've completely forgotten by now that I'm missing or whatever that were supposed to crash the market and never did. So here we are today. Prices are up over 5% since this time last year. No crash, things seem to be moving pretty smoothly right now. And now we're talking about cutting rates in the next 6 to 8 months at some point. And oddly enough, it seems the perfect time to buy real estate, in hindsight, looking back, would have been late summer to fall of 2022 when prices were substantially lower and interest rates were substantially lower, which coincidentally was also the exact moment when there was peak fear in the market. So what are we worried about today? What is the next thing that's going to crash Canadian real estate? Well, the first thing is the mortgage renewal crisis of 2024. There are a lot of mortgages coming up for renewal in the next 12 months. And again, all of these renewals will, of course, crash the market. Then we have the Airbnb ban, which doesn't affect all of Canada, but specifically in Vancouver, they are apparently banning all Airbnb not all of it, but for investors for the most part, they are banning investors from using Airbnb to profit as of May 2024. And again, that is going to cause investors to dump all the property on the market and crash the market. And there's probably a few others. Inflation is obviously always a concern right now, but those are the main two reasons why the market's going to crash as of the current narrative. So should we be worried about these two things? And I guess the first thing I will say is I'm a lot less worried about people having to renew their mortgages at 5.3 to 5.5%, which they were stress tested at 5 years ago, by the way, or whenever they took out that mortgage. Then I was worried about the banking crisis, or 8% inflation, or the Evergrande situation. Now, Airbnb, right? So the mortgage renewal crisis thing, basically what I'm saying is like, if people are renewing at 7%, then I'm scared. If they're renewing at 5.5%, I'm not very scared about it, but we will see. But the Airbnb thing, people think that come May 2024, suddenly there's just gonna be like every single investor that owns an Airbnb property is just gonna list their property all at the same time. But markets are forward looking. So what I think is happening, and what I think people don't realize is probably already happening, is the fact that, put it this way, if I owned an Airbnb unit and I find out that it is getting banned, am I gonna wait until it's banned to then sell it? Or what might be smarter is just, hey, they're banning this in the next 6 months. I should just get it ready to list and then sell right now. So a lot of that inventory that we're probably waiting to come on the market after the ban is likely on the market right now or already sold. Like if you know a stock is going to be profitable in 2025, you're not going to wait until it's profitable. You're going to purchase it now in hopes that you kind of benefit from that upswing, so to speak. And I'm just using that as an example to show you guys how markets are forward looking. They're not just going to wait until it's banned to sell those units. Some people will, but there's also a lot of people where that inventory is already on the market or it's already sold. So I'm not saying that the market isn't going to crash. And I'm not saying that we shouldn't be worried about a crash, but the market is always at risk of crashing. But what I am saying is that the current market's gonna crash narratives that we have today are much less scarier than the ones that we had a year ago, or even 6 months ago, or a year and a half ago. This is the peak least scary that they've been in the last 4 years. So subscribe if you enjoyed this video, like this video. I'm that Agent Kelly. I'm making moves to move you. Peace.